A routine morning flight from Atlanta to Chicago turned into a powerful lesson about prejudice, compassion, and the unexpected moments that can transform our perspectives. It was a crisp autumn morning when passengers were boarding United Airlines Flight 2487. Among them was a distinguished-looking black man in his mid-50s, wearing a well-tailored navy suit and carrying a worn leather briefcase that spoke of years of dedication to his work as a cardiac surgeon. As he made his way down the aisle to his assigned seat in first class, the usual shuffle of passengers storing luggage and finding their spots filled the cabin with familiar energy. But what happened next would leave an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed it. A woman in her early 60s, clutching her designer handbag and wearing an expression of visible discomfort, was already seated by the window. When she noticed who her seatmate would be, her reaction was immediate and unmistakable. She pressed the call button, and when the flight attendant arrived, she demanded a seat change in a voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "I can't sit here," she insisted, her voice trembling with what seemed like a mix of entitlement and anxiety. "There must be another seat available." The flight attendant, maintaining her professionalism, explained that the flight was full and no other first-class seats were available. What happened next left the entire cabin in stunned silence. Instead of responding with anger or hurt, the man smiled warmly and did something unexpected. He stood up, retrieved his briefcase from the overhead compartment, and addressed not just the woman, but everyone within earshot. His words, spoken with dignity and grace, would soon travel far beyond that airplane cabin. "I've spent the last 20 years of my life saving lives in the operating room," he said calmly. "When I open up a person's chest to operate on their heart, I've never once seen a heart that wasn't the same color as every other heart I've encountered." The cabin fell silent. Several passengers who had been pretending not to notice the unfolding drama now turned to listen. The woman's expression began to shift as she processed his words. "Ma'am," he continued, "I understand you're uncomfortable, and that's okay. We all carry prejudices we might not even be aware of. But today, we have a choice. We can either let these prejudices define us, or we can choose to learn from each other. I'd be honored to hear your story during this flight, and I'd be happy to share mine." The authenticity in his voice and the genuine compassion in his approach created a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Other passengers watched, waiting to see how this moment would unfold. The woman's hands, which had been tightly gripping her handbag, slowly relaxed. But just as the tension seemed to be easing, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom with an announcement that would add another unexpected twist to this already charged situation. The next few minutes would prove crucial in determining whether this would become just another story of division, or if it would transform into something much more meaningful. As the other passengers watched intently, no one could have predicted how the next few moments would unfold, or how this incident would not only change the lives of these two individuals but also inspire thousands of others who would later hear their story. The question hanging in the air was, would this become just another sad example of modern prejudice, or could it transform into a powerful testimony to the human capacity for growth and understanding? The pilot's announcement revealed a 30-minute delay due to routine maintenance checks, inadvertently providing an opportunity for what would become an extraordinary exchange. The surgeon, still standing in the aisle, used this moment to slowly gather his belongings, clearly giving the woman space to process her thoughts. A young flight attendant, who had been watching the situation unfold, approached with 2 cups of water. This simple gesture of kindness seemed to break the thick tension that had enveloped the first-class cabin. The woman, whose hands were now trembling slightly as she accepted the water, looked up at the surgeon with eyes that held a complex mix of emotions: shame, confusion, and something else that looked like the beginning of understanding. I don't know what to say," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the aircraft. The surgeon, who had been standing patiently, took this as his cue to sit down again. This time, the woman didn't flinch or protest. Instead, she seemed to be fighting an internal battle, one that was visible in the way she repeatedly folded and unfolded the corners of her boarding pass. As the maintenance delay continued, other passengers couldn't help but steal glances at the unfolding scene. A teenager in the row behind them had removed their headphones, clearly invested in what was happening. An elderly couple across the aisle held hands tightly, their expressions reflecting memories of similar struggles from decades past. The surgeon reached into his briefcase and pulled out a worn photograph. Though the other passengers couldn't see it clearly, the woman's reaction suggested it held something significant. Her hand moved to cover her mouth, and for the first time since the incident began, her eyes softened with genuine emotion. What the photograph revealed, and the story behind it, would later be described by witnesses as the turning point in this encounter. But at that moment, as the surgeon began to speak in a low, gentle voice that didn't carry beyond their row, the woman's entire demeanor began to change. Other passengers noticed how she gradually turned toward him, how her defensive posture slowly melted away. Though they couldn't hear the conversation, the impact was evident in the way she occasionally nodded, and in the tears that began to form in her eyes. The maintenance delay stretched on, but something remarkable was happening in that first-class cabin. The tension that had initially filled the space was being replaced by something else, a palpable sense of transformation that even the most skeptical observers couldn't deny. A flight attendant who passed by their row noticed the woman now fully engaged in conversation with the surgeon, both of them sharing what appeared to be deeply personal stories. The woman had pulled out her own wallet, showing what looked like family photographs, her hands no longer shaking but moving animatedly as she spoke. But just as the conversation seemed to be reaching a crucial point, the pilot's voice came over the intercom again. This time, the announcement carried news that would add yet another layer of complexity to this already intense situation. The other passengers, who had been invested in this unfolding drama, held their breath, wondering how this new development would affect the delicate connection that was forming between these two strangers. The surgeon's response to this announcement would prove to be another pivotal moment in this story, one that would challenge not only the woman's preconceptions but also those of everyone watching. As the cabin crew began preparing for what would happen next, the atmosphere in the first-class section crackled with anticipation. What would happen next would not only change the course of this flight but would also leave an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed it. The pilot's voice crackled through the cabin, announcing that due to approaching severe weather, all passengers needed to deplane immediately. The maintenance issue, combined with the incoming storm, meant the flight would be delayed for several hours. As passengers began gathering their belongings with frustrated sighs, something unexpected happened in the first-class cabin. The surgeon, who had been sharing his life story with the woman, suddenly clutched his chest and grew pale. His medical training kicked in immediately as he recognized the symptoms he was having a cardiac episode. The woman, who just 30 minutes ago had refused to sit next to him, was the first to notice his distress. Without hesitation, she pressed the call button urgently and announced in a clear, strong voice, "Is there a doctor on board? We need medical help." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone. The brilliant cardiac surgeon who had saved countless lives was now in need of medical attention himself. As flight attendants rushed forward with the plane's medical kit, the woman surprised everyone by revealing that she was a retired nurse. Her hands, which had earlier trembled with prejudice, now moved with practiced precision as she loosened his tie and began taking his pulse. The barriers that had existed between them just moments ago completely vanished in the face of this crisis. Other passengers watched in amazement as the woman who had initially caused such a scene now worked tirelessly to help the man she had rejected. She spoke to him in soothing tones, relaying critical information to the paramedics who were on their way. The surgeon, despite his condition, managed a weak smile that spoke volumes about forgiveness and human connection. The photograph that had started to bridge their differences lay forgotten on the floor, a black and white image that would later prove to be crucial to this story's conclusion. As airport medical staff rushed onto the plane, the woman refused to leave the surgeon's side, holding his hand and providing comfort in those tense moments. The other passengers, who had been witnesses to this entire arc of human emotion, from prejudice to compassion, stood in respectful silence as medical professionals worked. The teenager who had been watching earlier was now recording everything on their phone, capturing what would soon become a powerful testament to human transformation. But just as the paramedics were preparing to move the surgeon, he gripped the woman's hand tightly and whispered something that made her eyes fill with tears. The words he spoke in that moment would later be shared thousands of times across social media, touching hearts and changing minds around the world. The storm outside intensified, its dark clouds matching the gravity of the situation inside the cabin. Lightning flashed through the windows as the woman made a decision that would complete her transformation from antagonist to unexpected hero. Standing up with determination, she made an announcement to the medical team that left everyone on board stunned. The tension in the cabin reached its peak as thunder rumbled overhead, and the surgeon's condition appeared to worsen. What happened next would not only decide his fate, but would also provide a powerful conclusion to this unexpected journey of human connection and transformation. The woman, her voice steady with determination, announced to the medical team that she had spent 15 years specializing in cardiac care at the same hospital where the surgeon now worked. It was a stunning revelation, but an even more incredible coincidence was about to unfold. As the paramedics prepared to transport him, she noticed something familiar about his medical alert bracelet. The surgeon, through labored breathing, confirmed what she had begun to suspect. 20 years ago, he had been the resident who saved her husband's life during a complicated emergency heart surgery. The photograph he had shown her earlier wasn't just any photo, it was from that very night, a moment captured by a hospital staff member showing him working tirelessly to save her husband, though she had never seen the surgeon's face during that chaotic time. The other passengers watched in awe as this new layer of connection revealed itself. The teenage passenger who had been recording quickly realized they were capturing something far more powerful than a simple confrontation. They were witnessing destiny unfold in real time. But the situation took another dramatic turn when the medical team discovered their emergency response vehicle had been blocked by the severe weather conditions outside. The surgeon's condition was deteriorating, and they needed to act fast. The woman, drawing on her years of experience, knew they had only minutes to make a critical decision. Through the storm's intensifying fury, she remembered something vital from her nursing days. There was a specific breathing technique that could help stabilize cardiac patients in emergency situations. But performing it required complete trust between the caregiver and patient, the very trust she had initially shattered with her prejudiced reaction. The surgeon's eyes met hers, and in that moment, something profound passed between them. Despite the pain he was in, he managed to whisper something that caused the entire medical team to pause. The woman's response to his words would prove to be the key to saving his life, but it would require her to confront her deepest biases in front of everyone. Lightning illuminated the cabin once again as she made a split-second decision that would challenge everything she had believed just an hour ago. The other passengers, still recording this incredible scene, held their breath as she began to implement a controversial but potentially life-saving procedure. The flight attendants, who had witnessed the entire arc of this story, quickly cleared the area as the woman took charge of the situation. Her previous prejudices seemed like a distant memory as she worked with unwavering focus to help the man she had initially rejected. But just as it seemed they might have the situation under control, the surgeon's condition took an unexpected turn. What he revealed next would not only shock everyone present but would also forge an unbreakable bond between these two unlikely souls. The storm outside reached its peak intensity, matching the drama unfolding within the cabin, as both the woman and the surgeon faced their most challenging moment yet. The teenage passenger's phone continued recording as the woman made an announcement that would silence everyone on board. Her words, spoken through tears but with unmistakable strength, would soon become a testament to the power of human connection and the possibility of profound personal transformation. Through tears streaming down her face, the woman revealed to everyone present that her husband had passed away just 3 months ago from the same heart condition that was now threatening the surgeon's life. Her voice trembling but determined, she explained that her recent loss had fueled her bitter behavior, turning her grief into misplaced anger and prejudice. As she implemented the specialized breathing technique, she began humming a melody, the same song she had hummed to her husband during his final moments. The surgeon's eyes widened in recognition. "That song," he whispered between labored breaths, "I remember it from that night 20 years ago. You were humming it then too, outside the operating room." The breakthrough they needed came when the woman realized that her knowledge of her husband's condition, combined with her years of cardiac nursing experience, gave her unique insights into the surgeon's symptoms. Working together with the medical team, she helped identify a specific combination of symptoms that had been overlooked, one that required immediate but straightforward intervention. Just then, the storm outside began to ease, and emergency vehicles finally managed to reach the aircraft. But before the paramedics could transport him, the surgeon pulled out one last item from his briefcase, a letter. It was dated the day after her husband's surgery 20 years ago, a letter he had written but never delivered, expressing his gratitude for her calm presence outside the operating room that night. Her humming, he wrote, had given him strength during the most challenging surgery of his career. As the medical team prepared to move him, the surgeon's condition began to stabilize. The breathing technique, combined with the proper medical intervention, had worked. But it was what happened next that left everyone on board speechless. The woman, who had started this journey with hatred in her heart, made an announcement that would change both their lives forever. She revealed that she had been carrying her husband's final request to find and thank the doctor who had given them 20 more years together. She had been planning to visit the hospital that very week, never imagining that fate would bring them together in such an extraordinary way. The teenage passenger's video captured the powerful moment when the woman took the surgeon's hand and asked for his forgiveness, not just for her behavior on the plane, but for waiting so long to deliver her husband's message of gratitude. The surgeon's response, weak but clear, echoed through the cabin. "Sometimes the longest journeys lead us exactly where we need to be." As the medical team finally transported him off the plane, the woman accompanied them, their unlikely bond now unbreakable. The other passengers, many wiping away tears, had witnessed not just a medical emergency, but a profound demonstration of how life's most difficult moments can become bridges between divided hearts. The story might have ended there, but 3 weeks later, at a small ceremony at the hospital where both had served, the surgeon and the woman stood together to launch a new program. Their initiative, inspired by their extraordinary encounter, would work to bridge gaps between medical professionals and patients of all backgrounds, proving that even the deepest prejudices can be transformed into powerful forces for healing and understanding. The video of their encounter, shared by the teenage passenger, would go on to inspire millions, not just as a story of prejudice overcome, but as a testament to how life's most painful moments can sometimes lead to its most beautiful connections. Their story became a powerful reminder that sometimes, the greatest healing happens not in operating rooms, but in the moments when we open our hearts to those we once feared or misunderstood. 1 year later, that same airport terminal witnessed another powerful moment between the surgeon and the woman, but under very different circumstances. They were standing together, addressing a crowd gathered for the first anniversary of their Hearts Without Borders program, an initiative that had already helped bridge cultural and racial divides in healthcare settings across the country. The woman, now serving as the program's director, often shared how a single flight had transformed not just her life, but her entire worldview. She would tell audiences how her husband's final wish had led her to her greatest mission, though not in any way she could have imagined. The prejudice that had clouded her heart that day had given way to a purpose that honored both her husband's memory and the countless lives touched by their program. The surgeon, fully recovered and still performing life-saving operations, would often say that his cardiac episode on the plane was the universe's way of conducting an emergency surgery on human prejudice. His near-death experience had become a powerful teaching tool, demonstrating how life's most challenging moments often carry the seeds of its greatest transformations. The teenage passenger's video had gone viral, reaching millions of viewers worldwide. But more importantly, it had sparked conversations in hospitals, schools, and communities about confronting unconscious bias and choosing compassion over fear. The comments section beneath the video had become a space where people shared their own stories of transformation and healing. Perhaps the most touching outcome was the annual gathering they now hosted at the hospital, bringing together medical professionals and patients from diverse backgrounds to share their stories. The photograph that had sparked their connection, the one of the surgeon operating on her husband 20 years ago, now hung prominently in the hospital's main hall, alongside other images documenting their journey from strangers bound by prejudice to partners united in purpose. The flight attendants who witnessed their story that day had become regular volunteers in their program, sharing their perspective on how a moment of discrimination had transformed into a movement of understanding. The airline itself had incorporated their story into its staff training programs, using it as a powerful example of how to handle situations of bias with professionalism and compassion. During their speeches at the anniversary event, both the surgeon and the woman emphasized that their story wasn't just about overcoming prejudice, it was about recognizing how life's most painful moments often contain unexpected gifts. The woman would often conclude her talks by showing her husband's wedding ring, which she now wore on a chain around her neck, saying that his final wish had led her not just to gratitude, but to genuine transformation. As they wrapped up their anniversary presentation, the surgeon shared one final revelation that brought tears to many eyes. He announced that the cardiac episode he experienced on the plane had led to the discovery of a hereditary heart condition, one that could now be treated thanks to early detection. In a way, he said, the woman's initial act of prejudice had ultimately helped save his life, proving that even our worst moments can lead to our greatest blessings. Their story continues to inspire people around the world, not because it's a perfect tale of redemption, but because it's a genuine account of how human hearts, both literally and figuratively, can heal and transform. The airport terminal where their journey began now displays a small plaque commemorating their encounter, reminding travelers that sometimes the most important journeys we take aren't measured in miles, but in the distances our hearts travel to reach understanding. Today, whenever either of them boards a flight, they make a point of smiling at their seatmate, knowing that every encounter carries the potential for transformation, and that sometimes the most powerful changes begin with a simple choice to open our hearts to those we once feared to understand.